Good afternoon. We will get started in a couple of minutes. Okay. Again, hello everyone. I am Henry McKiven. I'm here to talk about the book that I recently published with LSU, The Consequences of Confederate Citizenship. This is a copy of the book. It has the house of the Pickens family on the front, on the cover. So what I want to do today is, with my remarks, is introduce you to the Pickens family, say some things about why it is that we here at the university have this collection of this Pickens collection, and then at the end talk a little bit about the letters themselves as time allows. The letters that are collected in the book are part of a collection we acquired at the University of South Alabama in 2011, or I should say the collection was donated to us by the family of John McCall. His grandfather had collected these documents, and the family needed a place to keep the documents long term. And John, who is a local attorney here in Mobile, came to us. And over the course of 3 years, we were able to work out an agreement to bring the papers here. The larger Pickens collection are plantation documents, business records, personal correspondence of the family of Samuel Pickens Jr. Samuel Pickens Jr. was the brother of Israel Pickens. Israel Pickens is well known. Samuel Pickens Jr. is not so well known. But Samuel Pickens Jr. was the lieutenant of Israel Pickens, who was elected governor of Alabama in 1821 and 1823. Samuel Pickens first traveled to Alabama with his brother John in 1817 to begin purchasing land near a place just north of Mobile called St. Stephen's. His older brother Israel, who had been a congressman from North Carolina, and recently had received an appointment to the Land Commission office in St. Stephen's, had dispatched Samuel and John to the area to find land to purchase. Now, this is land that had recently been taken from the natives. All of the Pickenses lived near Morganton, North Carolina, in Burke County prior to migrating to the Alabama Territory, along with that larger migration that was taking place at the time. Their expectation, of course, was that they would go to this newly opened land, this rich land, with enslaved people who they forced to go with them and produce cotton and make a fortune. So they migrated between 1817 and roughly the end of 1818 into South Alabama, the St. Stephen's area, and purchased land and became involved in local business and of course, politics. Now, Samuel Pickens Jr. was in many ways, the architect of this political machine in South Alabama that challenged an existing political faction based in Huntsville, Alabama, and was instrumental in the election of Israel in 1821 and 1823. Well, after Israel left office in 1823 and served as a senator from Alabama until his death, Samuel Pickens Jr. moved along with Israel and his other brothers. They moved up to Greene County, about 100 miles north of St. Stephen's, where they thought they would find a better disease environment. Israel Pickens's wife tragically had died at St. Stephen's of fevers that swept through the area every year. So they went to Greene County to hopefully find better land and a better disease environment. Sam Jr., when he got there, he left politics pretty much for the rest of his life, with the exception of the period of the territorial conflict over expansion, the acquisition of the Mexican territory. He went to Greene County in the late 1820s, began purchasing land, ultimately would purchase land that would make up his 3 plantations. Of course, all along, he's also purchasing enslaved people and building his business, these plantations. In the 1830s, he married a woman named Mary Meade, and who died shortly thereafter. He was building the home that you saw on the front cover, which is called Umbria, when Mary Meade died. At that point, Pickens, who was in a depressed state, moved around quite a bit, all along continuing to purchase land and to organize these 3 plantations that would remain in the family until after the Civil War. Ultimately, Pickens married a woman from Charleston. This is after a second wife died, named Mary Gaillard Thomas. This is in 1840 or so. So he married Mary Gaillard Thomas she moved down to just outside Greensboro, an area called Sawyerville in the Hollow Square district, moved to Umbria, what was the home plantation. And soon thereafter had Sam Pickens III, or Sam Pickens III was born soon thereafter. And quickly after that, the other children, James, William, Mary Pickens, whose letters are also in the collection, and Israel Pickens, young Israel Pickens, William, and Louisa Pickens. So over a course of about 4 or 5 years, she and Samuel Pickens Jr. had a fairly large family. By this time, the Pickens family had the 3 plantations and over 200 slaves. They were a significant slaveholding family at that point. Samuel Pickens died of unknown causes in 1854, Samuel Pickens Jr., leaving Mary Gaillard Pickens. And in the book, I refer to her as Mary Gaillard throughout to distinguish her from Mary Pickens, her daughter. So she's left with these children, and she assumed responsibility for the management of the plantations at that point, which is relatively unusual at the time. She, through a court case, was able to have herself designated the administrator of the Pickens estate. Samuel Pickens had died intestate, so the estate was divided among the children and the widow. Because the children were minors, however, Mary Gaillard Pickens was able to be named by the probate court as the administrator of the estate until the children reached their majority. So she's there in Greene County, and as much as she could, she left there. She didn't like being there very much. In the introduction, or the first chapter of the book, I do talk some about Mary Pickens and the challenges, Mary Gaillard Pickens, and the challenges she faced trying to manage these plantations. And she was centrally involved as well. She didn't just drop out. So the Civil War letters that are the focus of the collection are the letters that Mary Gaillard Pickens, Samuel Pickens III, James Pickens, and their sister Mary Pickens wrote during the Civil War. So one of the unique qualities of the Pickens Civil War letters is that we have these letters back and forth from the home front and the battlefront, which is relatively rare among Civil War letters. Usually the letters of Civil War soldiers, or the letters that we have of Civil War soldiers, are going one way. The soldier writes home, and the family kept those letters. So we have those. What we don't have are the letters written by the family to the soldiers. Or we have many of those, but we have fewer of those than the other. So in these letters, one can see this relationship between the battlefront and the home front, and the degree to which each influenced the other. Letters also are will afford some insight into how people at the time express their emotions. Mary Gaillard Thomas, for example, wrote often about her fears and anxieties for her son Sam III, who was the first one to uh, enter the Confederate Army, not voluntarily, but he he had joined an Alabama militia, and while he was in the militia, the Confederacy passed Conscription Act, and then the governor of the state transferred the militia into Confederate service. Uh, Mary Gaillard Thomas or Mary Gaillard Pickens had not wanted either son to enter Confederate service. They were supporters of the Confederacy, but she didn't want either one of them to enter Confederate service. And at the time when the war started, uh, that was possible because there was no conscription. One of the stories in the book that emerges is how changes in Confederate expectations for citizens uh, impacted this family. So when the Pickens family returned to Alabama in 1861, when the war started, they had been in Virginia, where the Pickens boys went to school. Well, Mary Gaillard Pickens had been in Raleigh, North Carolina, with her daughters and her younger children. They were going to school there. The daughters went to St. Mary's in Raleigh. When they returned to Alabama, the Pickens brothers, Sam and James, had promised their mother that they wouldn't go into the Confederate Army. And here again, they are really supportive of the Confederacy. There was no question to them that this is what should be done. Fairly typical of these young men at the time. And they had been involved at the private school they went to near Charlottesville, Virginia. They had been involved in forming these student militias and marching around. They had followed the secession of Virginia very closely. And in their letters to their mother during that period, which are in the book, they wrote of their support for the Confederacy. The thing that they didn't intend to do, however, at least at that point, was to enter the Army. Well, so not James, but Sam III in 1862 finds himself in the Confederate Army. He chose to join the 5th. Well, once he was forced to do this by the governor of Alabama. Basically, he entered service with the 5th Alabama Infantry Regiment, which in the fall of 1862 was in the Shenandoah Valley of Virginia with Stonewall Jackson's brigade. So he traveled up to join them in the fall of 1862, and from that point on would be involved in every major battle of the Army of Northern Virginia until the end of the Civil War. Now, James stayed at home. He was, the letters frequently speak of his incapacity for military service. So he remained at home to help his mother. Not uncommon at the time. Nobody thought much of it. He was able to purchase a substitute, pay for a substitute. They're a wealthy family. He could do that. So they get a substitute for James. But in 1864, or no, late 1863, early 1864, the Confederate government again changed its policy, and its conscription policy, and required all principals, people who had hired substitutes, to enter the service. Now, there were some exceptions to that. As it turned out, James missed one exception, and in his letters after he enters the Army, in his letters to his mother, expresses much guilt over missing this. His letters are very emotional, much different from the letters that Samuel III wrote. Samuel III letters were what might be viewed as more typically male in nature, I suppose. He didn't tell his mother a whole lot about what was happening. He would express some homesickness and so forth. But generally speaking, he kept hidden what was actually happening in combat. So you don't really see a lot of vivid descriptions of combat. James, on the other hand, told his mother everything. He first engaged in combat at the Battle of the Wilderness, and didn't last very long. James fled the scene, when he went to the rear, was hospitalized with what appeared to be what at the time medical professionals referred to as nostalgia, this breaking down, this emotional breakdown that soldiers went through. So James didn't last very long in combat. He would finally get a furlough to return home to recover in the fall of 1864, and was in Alabama when the end of the war came. So the letters cover this whole period, including the death of Mary Pickens, the daughter, the death of her fiance, Tom Biscoe, who was in a Louisiana regiment. Her letters are interesting for their descriptions of this deep depression that she entered into when her fiance was killed at the Battle of the Wilderness. Okay, I'm going to stop there and take questions.
Thank you. Our first question is about using primary sources like letters. Can you talk about how that provides a different sort of perspective on history, getting it directly from folks themselves, as well as sort of how to contextualize those sources for readers?
Yeah, that's well, one of the things that is a problem is trying to understand what the intent of the letter writer is. So, for example, when you're reading the letters of his mother, sometimes when she's describing how depressed she is and so forth to him, you begin to think, well, maybe she didn't need to tell her son, who's in a difficult situation already, all of that. So in reading letters and analyzing them, I was doing a lot of thinking. Well, what was it that she was, what was she trying to achieve with that? And concluded that, no, excuse me, hold on a second. Okay, and concluded that she must have been, and this was based on reading her pre-war letters too. Whenever they were separated, she would write these letters pleading with them to write her back. And it appears that when she was writing the letters during the Civil War, that her hope was to get him to reassure her, which he did in a lot of ways. But it also led him to cover up things. Um, the other problem with, I suppose, with working with uh, the letters from the uh, principals themselves is that they, of course, are distorting things. I mean, it's kind of an obvious process that we go through as historians, and they at times are reporting rumors and all that. So one of the things I had to do in contextualization will, is to read the newspaper, for example, that they read. They said in the letters that they received this particular newspaper. So when major battles that Sam was involved in occurred, I could I could read the newspaper, see what it was that they were learning about it, and and better understand uh, their their fears, really, that they expressed from not knowing what was happening. The other part of that was that I could also see how Sam was shaping their view of the war. So Sam, they would read in the newspaper that, for example, that the Confederate Army had to retreat from Pennsylvania after the Battle of Gettysburg. Well, there were some newspapers that were reporting this, especially outside of the region, the South, reporting this as a defeat for the Confederacy, which it was. But what they were hearing from Sam was that, well, you know, the army had to retreat. It needed to recover, but then by the October, November of 1863, what he's reporting is that the army's recovered and ready to go out and secure victory for the Confederacy. So so they clearly placed more or viewed Sam's reports as more accurate than what they were reading in the newspaper, though Sam's reports were often misleading. I don't. I hope that answered the question. It's a long answer.
I think it does. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Okay.
Our next question about these sources, can you tell us more about sort of how you came across this collection of correspondence, how you realized that it was something special that was sort of worth being focused on and zoomed in on? What was that process like of finding it and deciding to highlight it?
Yeah, sure. Great question. Well, what happened was this: the John McCall, who's an attorney here in Mobile, uh, had been working out with a member of our board of trustees, and his grandfather had collected all of these documents as a just a guy who, as a hobby, went around collecting old documents in the 1930s, the 1940s, 1950s, and he was like an amateur archivist. The way he got the Pickens letters is he went to Sawyerville, Alabama, near Greensboro, knocked on the front door of this house there, this big house, Umbria, the house is on the cover, which it burned down in 1970s, it's no longer there, but it was still there. And relatives of this family were there, and he just asked them, "Do you have any old documents or anything like that?" And they said, "Yeah, we've got all this stuff up in the attic." And so he went up there and he got it, and they just gave it to him, let him have it. And he kind of organized all of that. Well, after he died, the McCall family um, had all this stuff that Granddad had left to them. There's another part of the McCall collection as well. So he had all this stuff, and he needed it. He wanted it to be preserved. It was just sitting in this house near the John McCall's mother's house in Montgomery. So they called the university. Uh, the university vice president of development called my department chair at the time, who was Clarence Moore, and said, "Well, we've got this guy who wants thinks he wants to donate these historical documents. Can you guys go up to Montgomery and look at them, see if it's worth it?" And we did, and we immediately saw the importance of them. Uh, Doyle Lil McCall, John McCall's grandfather, had organized the Pickens portion into these notebooks. They were more organized than the other part of the collection, but so we were able to look through there and see, in this fairly complete collection of plantation business records, records about enslaved people, and these letters from the Civil War period, up until now, really. Samuel Pickens Jr. was just this obscure figure mentioned sometimes in a footnote related to Israel Pickens, but nobody knew much about him. And so we negotiated with the McCall family over the period of about 3 years. Our university president got involved and to secure this donation, which happened in 2011. So that's how I'd seen in processing the papers. I'm a regular member of the department. I'm not an archivist, but I did for 2 years. I was involved in processing the McCall collection. The Civil War letters were there. They had to be put back together and so forth. And when Michael Parrish, the editor of the series the book appears in, the McCall family had him they had him appraise the letters for insurance purposes. So he came down here, and we would talk while he was here about these letters, and it was fairly clear that those Civil War letters were, as I said a while ago, unique in offering these different perspectives and having both sides of this correspondence. So that's how all that came about.
Thank you. Our next question here is about the future of Civil War history. It's from Len in the comments. Says, where do you see the future of Civil War history with AI becoming the norm? There's a note here about ChatGPT yielding search results. Essentially, where do you see the role of AI in the future of this field?
I've been thinking about, well, of course, I'm sure it's going to evolve to a point where what I did for this collection may be just obsolete. I did all the transcribing from the handwritten documents and used my digital camera. Digital imaging wasn't as advanced now as then as it is now. So I had a little digital camera that I took pictures of because it was easier to decipher the handwriting by using digital images that I could expand stuff. So with AI, that's may not be necessary. At present, it's not very good at transcribing handwritten documents. I've done some tests with that to see what would happen. It's real incomplete. It's sort of like the speech to text software, where you end up having to spend a whole lot of time correcting mistakes. Now, if letters are transcribed, and I'm working on a project for my Civil War class this fall. If those letters are already transcribed, if you have, for example, a large data set like private voices, the private voices data set that's available online, you can take large numbers of these letters and copy them into Chat GPT. I did try this with one smaller collection of Civil War letters, and you can begin to get it will identify themes, uh, how words are used, how sentence structure, whatever, depending on how the prompts that you provide. What it doesn't do is provide context. It's not going to tell you about people who are mentioned in it and those sorts of things. But it could be used. I can see this. It's not going to happen. I'm not going to be doing it, but it could be used to analyze large data sets, large collections of letters.
Thank you. Our next question is, what are you working on next? Do you have a future project in mind? Is it similar to this, different, etc.?
It's different. I've got I'm going to write an essay about Socialist Party in Alabama for a collection an old friend of mine from graduate school is putting together on socialism in the South. So I'm going to kind of return to my labor history days.
Thank you so much. Well, that is our last question, so we can go ahead and say thank you and goodbye to the audience. Do you want to say goodbye?
Oh, yeah. You have to. Goodbye. Thanks for joining in.